Thank you, Elena. And now we have Sammy Lambert. And I have to be honest, Sammy, the first day I don't wear a bow tie, you had to take my cannon from me. No, I'm messing with you. But let's welcome Mr. Samuel Lambert here from Paducah Children's High School.
Hello? The Central Park Five. Rights were violated and injustice was served. A female jogger in Central Park was horrifically beaten, sexually assaulted, and left for dead during a tumultuous time of history. She was discovered early on April 20th, 1989. She was beaten so badly that she was in a coma for 12 days. The jogger, identified 12 years later as Trisha Melly, was so disfigured that her friends had to identify her by a gold ring she wore. This victim lost 75% of her blood and was lucky to be alive. She had no memory of the events that took place that night, and no idea of who did this to her. Some ruthless gang needed to pay for this atrocity that occurred in Central Park. After all, this damage had to be done by more than one person. Some ruthless gangs had been throwing rocks, attacking other joggers, and committing more serious crimes during this radical, tension-filled crime wave in 1989. 5 African American and Latino juveniles, ranging in age from 14 to 16 years old, had to be that gang. This wolf pack, or Central Park Five as they came to be called, that had to attack the Central Park jogger were all apprehended within hours of the beaten jogger being discovered. These 5 juvenile suspects were interrogated for over 24 hours without food, drink, or sleep. They were interrogated until they confessed to whatever their interrogators wanted to hear. There was no lawyer or knowledgeable legal representative present to advise them to their rights. Even though some of their parents were present, they were not educated on their children's legal rights. 4 of the 5 agreed to videotape confessions, and the juvenile that didn't agree to the videotaped confession on advice from his father was still convicted based on the testimony of the interrogating officers. They all quickly recanted their confessions and pleaded not guilty, stating that the confessions had been coerced. The DNA evidence didn't match, and there was no valid evidence against these minority juveniles other than their confessed, coerced confessions. 4 of these juveniles, Antron McCray, 15, Kevin Richardson, 15, Yusef Salam, 15, and Raymond Santana, 14, were sentenced to approximately 7 years in prison each. Corey Wise, 16 years old, was tried as an adult and sent to Rikers Island. All of the young men continued to state their innocence even while they had to complete their sentences. In 2002, 12 years after the fateful evening of 1989, a convicted murderer and serial rapist confessed to the offenses against the Central Park jogger. Matias Reyes confessed to the attack on Trisha Melly, and his DNA matched the DNA from the crime scene. December 19, 2002, the New York Supreme Justice withdrew all the charges against the Central Park Five. However, Antron McCray, Kevin Richardson, Yusef Salam, Raymond Santana, and Corey Wise had already served several years of undeserved time in prison. In 2003, the Central Park Five sued the city of New York for malicious prosecution, racial discrimination, and emotional distress. After more than 10 years of denials and arguments by the city, the Central Park Five received $41 million. The Central Park Five lived this line of life. When we fight, we win. They fought the injustice and brought to light how minorities and minority juveniles were treated so unfairly, particularly when it comes to basic human rights. One of the major issues of this case that is still an issue in the justice system today is being aware of a person's basic rights while in the custody of the police and during the interrogation process. Juvenile suspects are at more risk of violating their own rights than adults because they are not likely to be fully aware of their Miranda rights and warnings presented to them by the police. Juveniles may not realize what they say will be held against them, and they may say things that they feel will appease the interrogator, even if it isn't true. They may be easily manipulated in these types of situations and sometimes don't consider the consequences of what they're saying. Research has shown that juveniles would benefit from a simpler version of the Miranda rights and warnings, which are presented in a more plain and straightforward question statement format, such as, "You have the right to remain silent," which means you don't have to talk to me. Even if a parent is present when a juvenile is being questioned, the parent may not have any more legal knowledge than the child does, and may not be of any help to the underage detainee. If a parent would request a lawyer for themselves under these circumstances, they would strongly consider an attorney for their child as well. The Central Park 5 case is an example of juveniles not having proper advice on their rights. And even the case of being convicted as an adult, the consequences can be very serious. Even though many people consider juvenile crime as being expunged or erased when they become an adult, if their circumstances go the wrong way, they may not get that opportunity to clear their records. Another way that minorities and juveniles could retain their rights more effectively would be to have the whole interrogation process videotaped from the time of being in custody to the complete and end of the questioning process. That is a way that can prevent detainees from being coerced into confessions or having the rights of an attorney or legal guardian being violated. When we fight, we win. The justice system issue of the violation of our rights that occurred to minorities and juveniles when the Central Park 5 were wrongfully convicted and sentenced still exists today. We can work together to correct this injustice by implementing Miranda rights and warnings that are easier to understand, having proper legal representation present for the detainee, and videotaping the entire process to prevent a rights violation and provide proof of what actually occurred. If only the Central Park 5 would have had any of these options during the interrogation process, their lives may have been changed dramatically. Thank you.
Amen.
Let's give all the essay winners one